Okay, we've assembled our Chromebot 3000, and now it's time to bring him to life. Part 2 of our robot idle tutorial coming right up. Okay, so behind me you see the Chromebot 3000 in all its glory. A reminder that this was designed by Chromeworks member Soylina Efedia from Monaco, and she's done a really wonderful job drawing this. So today what we're going to be doing firstly is getting this guy set up to animate him properly. Now we want to be able to reposition these limbs, and one of the first problems that we're going to run into is that these pieces aren't connected together in a way that makes animation really intuitive. We're going to be, through the process of this, grabbing different parts of our guy and twisting them into new positions to make him look like he's posed in different ways. And then later on we'll be adding these poses together to turn them into a fun dance animation. Now, what makes this challenging, as I said, is that these guys are made up of different pieces. So if I grab this arm, for example, I'm left with the hand. And if I haven't done things correctly here, I have to reposition the hand as well every time, which is just a bit of a waste of energy. There are times when you're going to want to do fun stuff with the hand here, but if we set this guy up so that the proper parts that we're going to be moving around a lot are kind of glued together, I find that the animation process is a lot simpler. Let's get back into our T-pose here again. All right, so what I'm going to suggest we do is start to group the different moving parts of this robot together, and using the group command right up at the top of the menu here, and in the drawing tools in Scratch. And that way when we move things, we don't have to worry about them coming apart. Now the head here, I've already grouped together, and you can see how I'm going to be able to use that to make his neck go up and down as part of the dance routines, or even tilt. And again, that would be really difficult to do if all the pieces weren't attached together. You'd have to select them every time. All right, I also want to group together the lower arm and the hand, because those are going to be moving as a unit quite often. You can see here that if I drag a loop around both of them, these are the parts that are going to be moving for a lot of hand motions. So I'm going to sweep my cursor using the black arrow tool around these two objects, and then I'm going to hit that group button, which you can see is ungrayed now because we're ready to group something. There we go. Now that will often mess up the stacking order, so just remember this guy has to be moved to the back before we can use him properly. Alright, perfect. So this guy's ready to go. I'm going to group him one more time because we're also going to want him to be able to move his entire arm as well. And so I'm going to add one more group to this object that encompasses the upper arm, but not the shoulder. Remember, the shoulder is always going to stay in one place regardless of how our character moves. Okay, let's move that to the back, and that arm's good. I'm going to do the same thing with the right arm here. Group, and then send to back, and then group the whole thing one more time, and then send to back. And let's go ahead and do that with the legs as well. Okay, so this guy is pretty much rigged for animation. I also am going to glue together the central parts that never do move, so that if we do want to move the body, we don't get these guys out of position here. So let's go ahead and grab the body and the four joints that are attached to it, the two thighs and the two shoulders, and we'll group those. All right, beautiful. So now I can move those out of the way, for example, and do other stuff with those. Okay, actually I think I'm going to attach the neck to the body as well. I think that might be useful because the body The head's going to pivot, but the neck's always going to be rigid in this particular robot. You might design a different robot though, so all of these techniques are going to have to be modified and adapted for the shape of your particular robot. I had one robot in my class last week who had 3 joints on his arm instead of 2 joints. And of course that's going to take a whole other animation technique to get going here. Now that we've got our character properly set up, it's time to start on our first pose. Before we do though, I want to talk to you about onion skinning, which is a really cool animation feature that is not a regular part of Scratch. I would recommend though, guys, that you make this a part of your Scratch setup using a really cool utility that I've talked about in other tutorials called Scratch Add-Ons. It's available on the Chrome Web Store, and I will put a link to it down below in the description as well. So it's a perfectly safe add-on. It's used by millions of Scratch users, and it adds all kinds of cool functionality to Scratch. For example, this pause button that allows me to pause video games in the middle of them instead of just starting and stopping them is something that Scratch enables me to do. I also use other functions that allow me to count the number of clones in a game, for example, and a few other little features that I use. There's a really cool menu here that just has hundreds of options of different things that you can do with this Scratch add-on utility once you get it set up. Just all kinds of different ways you can tweak Scratch, change the shape of your blocks and their color, and change the way lots of things function inside the program, some of which are very useful and some of which are just fun. So once you do get this software launched, you can get into the settings menu and go searching for the particular tool that we're looking for, which is called onion skinning. So just type onion into the search bar, and here it is, onion skinning, and we just make sure it's switched on. So just go over to the tab on the right here and switch it on. And you might have to refresh your Scratch, but as soon as you've done that, you will find a whole new menu down at the bottom of the screen here. We won't have to get into all the settings for how onion skinning works here. There's a couple of different options that you can play around with. The important button here though is this one here that switches onion skinning on and off. So we'll want that switched on right now. And let me give you a quick demo of how it works. So our first pose here is going to be, I think, kind of an Egyptian pose where our character has his arms at right angles, this way on one side and then down. Sorry, my camera's not really showing, but so at right angles facing up on one side and down on the other side. We want to, instead of having just kind of teleport to that new position, I want to slowly have him bend his arms to get into that position, which means we're going to need a few intermediate steps, and we want those to be arranged properly so that it looks like a natural flow of movement that he's doing between them. The first step is going to be making a copy of our default costume. So I'm just going to right click on the costume on the left here and select duplicate. There we go. Now let's rename our sprite. I'm going to call it Egyptian. And it's going to take several frames, probably 3 or 4 frames together, depending on how I animate it. So I'll just put a number here, Egyptian 1. And Scratch will actually add more numbers to the end of that animation as I continue to duplicate it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and ungroup this arm and start to move it, just the top part, which is still grouped, remember. And I'm going to move it into, start to move it into an upward position here. So I'm going to tilt it a little bit. Every time you tilt it, you're also going to have to reposition it a little bit. There we go. And if you look carefully, you can see a ghostly version of the original layout right down below us here. You can change that in the settings to make it darker and more obvious by changing this opacity slider down here. So let's try bumping that up a little bit, maybe to 50. There we go, we're at 50% opacity now. And so now you can see exactly what that animation is going to look like and decide whether you've moved it too far or too little. And it's just a really helpful function for animating. And in fact, any professional animator worth their salt will use onion skinning all the time. So it's something that really has been left out of the Scratch interface, much to the loss of the animation community. And you should run right out and install this functionality. Okay, let's keep on going with our Egyptian. I'm going to work on the right arm later. Let's just carry on with the left arm. or sorry, this is technically this is the right arm, right? Okay, so let's duplicate it again. And again, you see my onion skin has disappeared because we're always looking at just the last costume. You can tweak these settings to look at like the last 2 costumes, for example. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. So let's, now that we've made a duplicate, let's twist it again. And there, now I can see all 3 of the costumes that I've done here. And I can go backwards in time back to the original. The key here is I'm able to see the spacing between these objects and make sure that it's relatively even so that I get a nice smooth animation out of this. Let's right click on it again and duplicate, and now again we'll move it. The ghost won't be obvious until we actually move the first one out of the way and reveal the hidden onion skin down below. Okay, so that's looking pretty good, and I think we'll just need one more to get into our right position here. So Egyptian 4 here will be the actual final part of the pose here. Beautiful. Now that I look at it, I see that that onion skin Egyptian 3 is not quite right here, so I'm just going to tweak it around a little bit. I actually want to look at the last animation as well as the one before it. So as well as animating the previous 2 costumes, I'm going to animate the next 1 costume as well. There we go. Now I can really get a clear view of what I'm doing here with the animation. Loving it. Okay, so I'm just going to space this a little bit better and make sure it looks nice and smooth. Okay, we've got a lovely animation here. I'm going to turn the onion skinning off for a second here. And let's go back to our original spot here and let's have a look at what that looks like. I'm going to do a simple bit of code here that makes him go into that position and then makes him go back down again and does that in a loop, just so that we can get a look at this animation over and over again. So I'm going to go, when green flag clicked, forever. We're going to go to our looks commands here and grab a next costume. Now these costume changes always happen too quickly, and so we do always want to have a delay in there. So I'm going to go wait 0.2 seconds. There we go. So now it's going to cycle through these different animations and then go back down to the beginning again. Perfect. And that's looking pretty smooth. I'm going to try reducing that wait time though. Let's see what 0.1 seconds looks like. That's looking much more smooth here. You can really tell when we move from down to up and then back down again instead of flashing back to the first costume. Let me show you how that's done. So we're going to start at the default costume with this, and we're going to go through 4 costume changes. So I'm going to put a repeat 4 here, and I'm going to put this next costume code inside there. And at the very beginning, I'm going to tell it to start at that default costume. So let's go switch costume to default before we get into that loop. There we go. Now we're at default, and then we'll go through the next 4 costumes, and then we want to go backwards. So what I'm going to do is let's just duplicate all of this. So the entire repeat loop here with its contents, and put it right down below, and that's going to be the arm moving back up again. So now I can't go to next costume. I want to go to previous costume, but there is no previous costume command in Scratch. So we have to go switch costume. Took me a long time to figure out how this works, but having watched it in somebody else's project, it really helped out a lot. And so we're going to go switch costume to costume number -1, and that's the way to move backwards through your costume selection. So switch costume to costume number -1, and we'll do that 4 times. And now you'll see when we click the code, there we go, that we're doing a little waving motion here right now. Perfect. All right, so we're going to remember what we did with the first movement, and we're going to do the same thing with the left arm now. So let's go back into the costume. We'll go into Egyptian 1 here, and seeing the way that this has been tilted just a little bit, we'll do the same thing. Let's ungroup 1 level here, and we'll do that. I'm going to turn the onion skinning back on again. There we go. So we can get a sense of how successfully we're doing this. Beautiful. And let's go down to Egyptian 2. Now, we've got a bit of a problem here, right? Because I haven't made a duplicate, so my guy is still in the original position here. That's okay though, I can use that onion skinning is really going to help to orient me here though. So let's click on this main object here, ungroup it, and then slide it over. Well, that's probably a pretty good argument for doing both arms simultaneously, just so that we can duplicate them and get the benefit of our last movement there. But with the onion skinning, it's not such a big deal. Remember when you're spinning something, if you do want it to be facing on a 90-degree angle or a 45-degree angle, you can hold down that shift key while you're spinning, and it constrains your directions so that you can only go in perfect 45-degree angles. A really good way to take something that's facing up and make it face down in a perfect way like that. All right, I'm seeing some minor problems with my onion skinning here that I might want to have a look at. Let's just tweak things a little bit, just to arrange them a little better. This is really just a matter of how much playing around you want to do to get stuff as clean as you want. The animation practice is going to happen so quickly that you're really not going to be able to tell when you've imperfectly animated something. So you don't have to be nearly as careful about it as I am. Going for a quickie look. We're going to end up with a lot of poses here if you want to do any kind of dance, so that's something you should think about as well. Let's introduce some head tilt while we're going here. So I'm going to just tilt his head a little bit to the right, and we'll just keep doing that. And I'll tilt his head to the right again, a little bit more. And then maybe we'll have it go back again. So let's match ourselves with that previous onion skin. From here, and then back to a stable point again. So we're actually back at 90 degrees, which we already are at. Okay, let's switch the onion skinning off and have another look at our code here. There we go. That's kind of lovely. Okay, so let's add a little bit of a knee bend while we're doing this. We're not going to be happy with this particular pose until we've done a whole bunch of other stuff too. So let's go ahead and start to bend this guy down. We'll have him do kind of a bow-legged thing where his knees are sticking out, and that should work quite nicely. So we'll go down to the first Egyptian, undo that movement. Remember to keep your finger near that Control Z button so you can undo every once in a while if you accidentally jiggle something in the wrong direction. Okay, let's ungroup this guy and ungroup this guy. So as I said, we're kind of going to bow leg him, which means that we're going to also be moving him a little lower down on the screen. I'm going to arrange the settings on this view here so that he's exactly stepping on the bottom of my screen here, and that way I'll know where the ground level is as I'm duplicating that. I think that change will be active in other frames of animation. Yes, it will. So we're going to use that as a reference point so that no matter what I do to bend these legs and make them shorter, this character is always going to still be on the ground. Okay, so let's take the first step here. We're going to rotate the leg out just a little bit like that. Do the same thing here on the opposite side. And we'll take the leg and reconnect it. We're going to want the leg to be in roughly the same place again. So we want to be careful as we're spinning it. Oh, I'm going to have to move it up after all. There we go. Maybe we'll tilt this back again. Let's have a look at that onion skin and see what that looks like in the onion skin view. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Alright, let's do the next frame. Now, I want to position this from where the other guys were. And here's another technique that you can use. I'm going to just delete these legs entirely. I'm going to go back to these partly bent legs, make a copy of them, Whoop, I grouped them by accident. So we'll try that again. We'll select the legs, make a copy, and right here we're going to go paste, and voila, the paste actually lands in exactly the same place as the old picture. And so that's another way to kind of resurrect the old layout from the last one, so you can make changes from there. I'm not happy with these settings anymore. I'm finding the opacity a little bit high here on the ghost. I want it really clear which one is the original and which one is the ghost. There we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and tilt this a little bit more. I'm going to move this out a little further. I'm going to try and keep his toe in roughly the same place. Then I'm going to move the upper leg and the knee to kind of match. And you can see right away that this is not going to match because the body is too far away. And that's why we're going to have to bring that whole body down to meet the original part. All right. Let's grab everything at the top half of this object now, and we'll start to bring it down. I think we'll have to do in the previous frame as well. So I'm going to click on that arrow tool, draw a box around the entire top half of our robot, and I'll just bring him down using my arrow keys to make sure this is all at the front. There we go. I'm going to turn that onion skinning off because I'm finding it too hard to figure out what's going on here. I really want to rearrange this until our robot looks right again. That's looking pretty good. Let's do that same thing with this guy. So, do you do the limbs one at a time and do all the costumes, or do you do all the positions for each costume and then make a duplicate of the costume? There's a good argument to be made that that second way of doing it is actually better, but I was inclined to do it the first way myself. Let's move it down a little bit. We'll turn that ghost onion skinning back on again, just so we can make sure the height is around right here. Beautiful. And I don't think we should move the legs down any further here, so I'm just going to make a copy of those legs. And I'm just going to put those last couple legs in the same position here. Let's turn the onion skinning back on here so we can get the height right. And I'll do a paste here. And that's in the right position now, so now I can move that body down to match. Let's go ahead and do that. And we'll have to bring that to the front. Beautiful. Okay, so I think this should be good, and we can test this out now by running the animation one more time. So let's have a look. There we go. We've got a really funky dance move there. Woo! All right. So your mission is going to be to create as many of these dance moves as you want. I'm already getting submissions from students who are having their robots do all kinds of amazing dance moves. I had one student actually do a student doing some break dance moves last week in class, and he actually did it surprisingly quickly. So there's really no end to the kind of poses you can get these guys going into. Alright, so that's the basics of how to pose our new robot and get it to do a cool dance move. You're going to need to have a lot more moves going in order to have a really sophisticated dance here. So in our next episode, I'm going to talk about how to use custom blocks to code different dance moves so that we can control them all with one block. And that way start to string together the choreography of our dance so that we can very, very quickly switch back and forth between the dance moves without having to do a whole lot of coding. So looking forward to showing that to you. In the meantime, you can go and enter our Robot Idol contest and find all of these tutorials and all the other material we're putting together at chromeworks.ca/robot. We still haven't announced a closing date for our contest, but we're very excited to have your entries whenever you're ready, and we will be announcing a closing date soon. Winners again will be, the robots will be starring in a brand new music video that the Chromeworks crew is going to be putting together sometime in February, March. So looking forward to seeing your entries, guys. Get them going. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.